Okay. What chapter or what page are you on?
I'm on page 182.
Okay, I'm on 166. This is chapter 10. Our finish to Waverly.
Woo-hoo.
Who's Waverly?
Yay.
Chess player.
Our chess player. Fantastic.
Oh, shoot.
All right. Interesting. This title is called Four Directions, which alludes to what element in the chapter we read already from her? What goes in four directions?
Chess piece.
Well, there is a chess
rook,
piece, but also, what was the other symbol from the earlier chapter? Chess, and what else goes in four directions? Danny, what other symbol goes in all directions?
Wind.
Wind. Fantastic.
Oh, I saw
Okay.
that.
I had taken my mother out to lunch at my favorite Chinese restaurant in hopes of putting her in a good mood, but it was a disaster. When we met at the Four Directions restaurant, she eyed me with immediate disapproval. Ah, yeah, what's the matter with your hair? She said in Chinese. What do you mean, what's the matter? I said. I had it cut. Mr. Rory had styled my hair differently this time, an asymmetrical blunt line fringe that was shorter on the left side. It was fashionable, yet not radically so. Looks chopped off, she said. You must ask for your money back. I sighed. Let's just have a nice lunch together, okay? She wore her tight-lipped, pinched nose look as she scanned the menu, muttering, not too many good things, this menu. Then she tapped the waiter's arms, wiped the length of her chopsticks with her finger, and sniffed. This greasy thing, do you expect me to eat with it? She made a show of washing out her bowl with a hot tea. People are so loud. And then warmed other restaurant patrons seated near us to do the same. She told the waiter to make sure the soup was very hot. And of course, it was by her tongue's expert estimate, not even lukewarm. What are you doing? There are things. Go away. Go outside. Go outside. You're so loud. I have people reading. Where are we? That was so, like, I hate sophomores. I hate sophomores. Sophomores who will see this video next year. You're the worst.
Yeah, that's your kid.
You shouldn't get so upset. I said to my mother, Danny, please stop talking. I said to my mother after she disputed a charge of $2 extra because she had specified chrysanthemum tea instead of the regular green tea. Besides, unnecessary stress isn't good for your heart. Nothing is wrong with my heart, she huffed as she kept a disparaging eye on the waiter. And she was right. Despite all the tension she places on herself and others, the doctors have proclaimed that my mother, at age 69, has the blood pressure of a 16-year-old and the strength of a horse. And that's what she is, a horse. Born in 1918, destined to be, that's from the zodiac signs, Chinese zodiac, destined to be obstinate and frank to the point of tactlessness. She and I make a bad combination because I'm a rabbit born in 1951. Supposedly sensitive, with tendencies toward being thin-skinned and skittery at the first sign of criticism. After our miserable lunch, I gave up the idea that there would ever be good time to tell her the news, that Rich Shields and I were getting married. Okay, all of our women are now in big-time relationships, and now we shall see Waverly's relationship with her mother has gotten much worse. They can't even have a dinner with each other without fighting. Interesting. Why are you so nervous? My friend Marlene Ferber had asked over the phone the other night. It's not as if Rich is the scum of the earth. He's a tax attorney like you, for Christ's sake. How can she criticize that? You don't know my mother, I said. She never thinks anybody is good enough for anything. So elope with the guy, said Marlene. That's what I did with Marvin. Marvin was my first husband, my high school sweetheart. So Waverly has been married twice. So there you go, said Marlene. So when my mother found out, she threw her shoe at us, I said, and that was just for openers. My mother had never met Rich. In fact, every time I brought up his name, when I said, for instance, that Rich and I had gone to the symphony, that Rich had taken my 4-year-old daughter, Shoshana, to the zoo, my mother found a way to change the subject. Did I tell you, I said as we waited for the lunch bill at Four Directions, what a great time Shoshana had with Rich at the Exploratorium. Oh, interrupted my mother, I didn't tell you. Your father's doctor said maybe need exploratory surgery, but no. Now they say everything normal, just too much constipated. I gave up, and then we did the usual routine. I paid for the bill with a 10 and 3 ones. My mother pulled back the dollar bills and counted out exact change, 13 cents, and put that on the tray instead, explaining firmly, "No tip." She tossed her head back with a triumphant smile. And while my mother used the restroom, I slipped the waiter a $5 bill. He nodded to me with deep understanding. While she was gone, I devised another plan. "Stinks to death in there," muttered my mother when she returned. She nudged me with a little travel package of Kleenex. She did not trust other people's toilet paper. "Do you need to use?" I shook my head. "But before I drop you off, let's stop at my place real quick. There's something I want to show you." My mother had not been to my apartment in months. When I was first married, she used to drop by unannounced until one day I suggested she should call ahead of time. Ever since then, she has refused to come unless I issue an official invitation. My parents are the exact same way. And so I watched her, seeing her reaction to the changes in my apartment, from the pristine habitat I maintained after the divorce, when all of a sudden I had too much time to keep my life in order, to this present chaos, a home full of life and love. The hallway floor was littered with Shoshana's toys, all bright plastic things with scattered parts. There was a set of Rich's barbells in the living room, 2 dirty snifters of the coffee table, the disemboweled remains of a phone that Shoshana and Rich took apart the other day to see where the voices came from. "It's back here," I said. We kept walking, all the way to the black back bedroom. The bed was unmade. Dresser drawers were hanging out of the socks, ties spilling over. My mother stepped out over running shoes, more of Shoshana's toys. Rich's black loafers, my scarves, a stack of white shirts, just back from the cleaners. Her look was one of painful denial. I would mark that as an annotation. Reminding me of a time long ago when she took my brothers and me down to the clinic to get our polio booster shots. As the needle went into my brother's arm and he screamed, my mother looked at me with agony written all over her face and assured me, "Next one doesn't hurt." But now, how could my mother not notice that we were living together? This was as serious and would not go away even if she didn't talk about it. She had to say something. I went to the closet and then came back with a mink jacket that Rich had given me for Christmas. It was the most extravagant gift I had ever received. I put the jacket on. "It's sort of a silly present," I said nervously. "It's hardly cold enough in San Francisco to wear mink, but it seems to be a fad that what people are buying their wives and girlfriends these days." My mother was quiet. She was looking toward my open closet, bulging with racks of shoes, ties, my dresses, and Rich's suits. She ran her fingers over the mink. "This is not so good," she said at last. "It is just leftover strips. The fur is too short, no long hairs. How can you criticize a gift?" I protested. I was deeply wounded. "He gave me this from his heart. Star that." "That is why I worry," she said. And looking at the coat in the mirror, I couldn't fend off the strength of her will anymore, her ability to make me see black where there was once white, white where there was once black. That's another chess moment as well, the white versus black pieces. The coat looked shabby, Daddy. Can you check the door? Thank you. An imitation of romance. Aren't you going to say something else? Aren't you going to say something else? I asked softly. "What should I say?" "About the apartment, about this." I gestured to all the signs of Rich lying about. She looked around the room, toward the hall, and finally she said, "You have career. You are busy. You want to live like mess. What can I say?" My mother knows how to hit a nerve, star that. And the pain I feel is worse than any other kind of misery, because what she does always comes as a shock, exactly like an electric jolt that grounds itself permanently, bye guys, in my memory. I still remember the first time I felt it. I was 10 years old. Even though I was young, I knew my ability to play chess was a gift. I'm recording. I'm so sorry. It's going to be a while, but I will come back up to class. Yeah, I'll find you before my staff meeting. It was effortlessly so easy. I could see things on the chessboard that other people could not. I could create barriers to protect myself that were invisible to my opponents, and this gift gave me supreme confidence. I knew what my opponents would do, move for move. I knew at exactly what point their faces would fall when my seemingly simple and childlike strategy would reveal itself as a devastating and irrevocable course. I loved to win. And my mother loved to show me off, like one of my many trophies she polished. She used to discuss my gains as if she had devised the strategies. I told my daughter, use your horses to run over the enemy, she informed one shopkeeper. She won very quickly this way. And of course, she had said this before the game. That and 100 other useless things that had nothing to do with my winning. To our family friends who visited, she would confide, you don't have to be so smart to win chess. It is just tricks. You blow from the north, south, east, and west. There's our directions again. The other person becomes confused. They don't know which way to run. I hated the way she tried to take all the credit. And one day I told her so, shouting at her on Stockton Street in the middle of a crowd of people. I told her she didn't know anything, so she shouldn't show off. She should shut up. Words to that effect. That evening and the next day, she wouldn't speak to me. She would say stiff words to my father and brothers as if I had become invisible, and she was talking about a rotten fish she had thrown away, but which had left behind its bad smell. I knew this strategy, the sneaky way to get someone to pounce back in anger and fall into a trap, so I ignored her. I refused to speak and waited for her to come to me. After many days had gone by in silence, I sat in my room, staring at the 64 squares of my chessboard, trying to think of another way. And that's when I decided to quit playing chess. Of course, I didn't mean to quit forever. At most, just for a few days. And I made a show of it. Instead of practicing in my room every night, as I always did, I marched into the living room and sat down in front of the television set with my brothers, who stared at me, an unwelcome intruder. I used my brothers to further my plan. I cracked my knuckles to annoy them. Ma, they shouted, make her stop, make her go away. But my mother did not say anything. Still, I was not worried, but I could see how I would have to make a stronger move. I decided to sacrifice a tournament that was coming up in 1 week. I would refuse to play in it, and my mother would certainly have to speak to me about this, because the sponsors and the benevolent associations would start calling her, asking, shouting, pleading to make me play again. Seems kind of interesting. And then the tournament came and went, and she did not come to me crying, why are you not playing chess? I was crying inside because I learned that a boy whom I had easily defeated on 2 other occasions had won. I realized my mother knew more tricks than I had thought, but now I was tired of her game. I wanted to start practicing for the next tournament, so I decided to pretend to let her win. I would be the one to speak first. I am ready to play chess again, I announced to her. I had imagined she would smile and then ask me what special thing I wanted to eat. But instead, she gathered her face into a frown and stared into my eyes as if she could force some kind of truth out of me. Why do you tell me this? Why do you tell me this? I just repeated the same thing. She finally said in sharp tones, you think it is so easy. One day quit, next day play. Everything for you is this way. So smart, so easy, so fast. I said, I'll play, I whined. The way she's kind of summing up the one day quit, next day play, everything for you, so easy, so smart, so fast. Isn't that very similar to how earlier in the book they kind of talked about like the American way of doing something and the Chinese way of doing something? That is definitely the American way, that fast kind of, I expect results. Right now.
Something I realized that also she uses a lot of moves to do stuff, and her mom used 1 move and she won.
1 move, very good. She definitely did. This is our analogy to chess, and then later when we play mahjong tomorrow. No, she shouted, and I almost jumped out of my scalp. It is not so easy anymore. I was quivering, stunned by what she said and not knowing what she meant. And then I went back to my room. I stared at my chessboard, its 64 squares, to figure out how to undo this terrible mess. And after staring like this for many hours, I actually believed that I had made the white squares, why do I feel like I'm still good. The white squares black and the black squares white, and everything would be all right. And sure enough, I won her back. The night I developed a high fever and she sat next to my bed, scolding me for going to school without my sweater. In the morning, she was there as well, feeding me rice porridge flavored with chicken broth she had strained herself. She said she was feeding me this because I had the chicken pox and one chicken knew how to fight another. And in the afternoon, she sat in a chair in my room, knitting me a pink sweater while telling me about a sweater that Auntie Suyan had knit for her daughter June, and how it was most unattractive and of the worst yarn. I was so happy that she had become her usual self. But after I got well, I discovered that, really, my mother had changed. She no longer hovered over me as I practiced different chess games. She did not polish my trophies every day. She did not cut out the small newspaper item that mentioned my name. It was as if she had erected an invisible wall, and I was secretly groping each day to see how high or how wide it was. At my next tournament, while I had done well overall, it was in the end the points were not enough. I lost. And what was worse, my mother said nothing. She seemed to walk around with this satisfied look as if it had happened because she had devised this strategy. I was horrified. I spent many hours every day going over in my mind what I had lost. I knew it was not just the last tournament. I examined every move, every piece, every square, and I could no longer see the secret weapons of each piece, the magic within the intersection of each square. I could see only my mistakes, my weaknesses. It was as though I had lost my magic armor, and everybody could see this, where it was easy to attack me. Over the next few weeks and later months and years, what's up? Yes, ma'am. Over the next few weeks and later months and years, I continued to play, but never with that same feeling of supreme confidence. I fought hard with fear and desperation. If a chess player is playing with fear and desperation, do you think they're going to be really good in their game? Yeah, or just in life? When I won, I was grateful and relieved, when before she was very nonchalant. And when I lost, I was filled with growing dread and the terror that I was no longer a prodigy, that I had lost the gift and had turned into someone quite ordinary. When I lost twice to the boy whom I defeated so easily a few years before, I stopped playing chess altogether. And nobody protested. I was 14. That always makes me sad because I don't know if sometimes your guys' parents say stuff and then it pushes you back into something, or because they said something, it allows you to move forward. Sometimes saying nothing at all is better, but sometimes being a push is better. And this is why parenting is very hard, because there's no way to know which way to go. Appreciate your parents. You know, I really don't understand you, said Marlene when I called her the night after I had shown my mother the mink jacket. You can tell the IRS to piss up a rope, but you can't stand up to your own mother. I always intend to, and then she says these little sneaky things, smoke bombs and little barbs, and why don't you tell her to stop torturing you, said Marlene. Tell her to stop ruining your life. Tell her to shut up. That's hilarious, I said with a half laugh. You want me to tell my mother to shut up? Sure, why not? Well, I don't know if it's explicitly stated in the law, but you can't ever tell a Chinese woman to shut up. You could be charged as an accessory to your own murder. I love that one. I wasn't so much afraid of my mother as I was afraid for Rich. I already knew what she would do, how she would attack him, how she would criticize him. She would be quiet at first. Then she would say a word about something small, something she had noticed, and then another word and another, each one flung out like a little piece of sand, one from this direction, another from behind, more and more, until his looks, his character, his soul would have been eroded away. There's directions again. And even if I recognized her strategy, her sneak attack, I was afraid that some unseen speck of truth would fly into my eye, blur what I was seeing, and transform him from the divine man I thought he was into someone quite mundane, mortally wounded with tiresome habits and irritating imperfections. Waverly is afraid to be ordinary, and she's also now afraid that her mother will make her boy ordinary as well. That's very interesting. This happened to my first marriage, to Marvin Chen, with whom I had eloped when I was 18 and he was 19. When I was in love with Marvin, he was nearly perfect. He graduated third in his class at Lowell and got a full scholarship to Stanford. He played tennis. He had bulging calf muscles and 146 straight black hairs on his chest. He made everyone laugh, and his own laugh was deep, sonorous, masculine, sexy. He prided himself on having favorite love positions for different days and hours of the week. All he had to do was whisper, "Wednesday afternoon," and I'd shiver. But by the time my mother had her say about him, I saw his brain had shrunk from laziness, so that now it was good only for thinking up excuses. He chased golf and tennis balls to run away from family responsibilities. His eye wandered up and down other girls' legs, so he didn't know how to drive straight home anymore. He liked to tell big jokes to make other people feel little. He made a loud show of leaving $10 tips to strangers, but was stingy with presents to family. He thought waxing his red sports car all afternoon was more important than taking his wife somewhere in it. My feelings for Marvin never reached the level of hate. No, it was worse in a way. It went from disappointment to contempt to apathetic boredom. It wasn't until after we separated, on nights when Shoshana was asleep and I was lonely, that I wondered, perhaps my mother had poisoned my marriage. I would mark that. Thank God her poison didn't affect my daughter, Shoshana. I almost aborted her, though. When I found out I was pregnant, I was furious. I secretly referred to my pregnancy as my growing resentment, and I dragged Marvin down to the clinic so he would have to suffer through this too. It turned out we went to the wrong kind of clinic. They made us watch a film, a terrible bit of puritanical brainwash. I saw those little things, babies they called them, at 7 weeks, and they had tiny, tiny fingers. And the film said that the baby's translucent fingers could move, that we should imagine them clinging for life, grasping for a chance, this miracle of life. If they had shown anything else except tiny fingers, so thank God they did, because Shoshana really was a miracle. She was perfect. I found every detail about her to be remarkable, especially the way she flexed and curled her fingers. From the very moment she flung her first fist away from her mouth to cry, I knew my feelings were inviolable. But I worried for Rich, because I knew my feelings for him were vulnerable to being felled by my mother's suspicions, passing remarks, and innuendos. And I was afraid for what I would then lose, because Rich Shields adored me in the same way I adored Shoshana. His love was unequivocal. Nothing could change it. He expected nothing from me. My mere existence was enough. And at the same time, he said that he had changed for the better because of me. He was embarrassingly romantic. He insisted he never was until he met me, and this confession made his romantic gestures all the more ennobling. At work, for example, when he would staple FYI for your information, notes to legal briefs and corporate returns that I had to review, he signed them at the bottom, FYI, forever, you and I. The firm didn't know about our relationship, so that kind of reckless behavior on his part thrilled me. If we were just to stop and compare Waverly's relationship with Rich, it's actually our first daughter relationship or mother-husband, like the older generation's relationship of a good romantic moment. It's our first time seeing a romantic relationship really prosper. The dads are kind of obsolete. They're kind of absent. We don't really hear from them. They're not a huge part of the children's memories growing up. And we don't like Harold. And we're also pissed at Ted because Ted is divorcing Rose. So this is our first moment. Let's see if we continue to like Rich, because we like him right now. The sexual chemistry was what really surprised me, though. I thought he'd be one of those quiet types who was awkwardly gentle and clumsy, the kind of mild-mannered guy who says, "Am I hurting you?" when I can't feel a thing. But he was so attuned to my every movement, I was sure he was reading my mind. He had no inhibitions, and whatever ones he discovered he'd pry away from me like little treasures. He saw all those private aspects of me, and I mean not just sexual private parts, but my darker side, my meanness, my pettiness, my self-loathing, all the things I kept hidden. So that with him, I was completely naked. And when I was feeling the most vulnerable, when the wrong word would have sent me flying out the door forever, he always said exactly the right thing at the right moment. He didn't allow me to cover myself up. He would grab my hands, look me straight in the eye, and tell me something new about why he loved me. I'd never known love so pure, and I was afraid that it would become sullied by my mother. So I tried to store every one of these endearments about Rich in my memory, and I planned to call upon them again when the time was necessary. I would mark that too. After much thought, I came up with a brilliant plan. I concocted a way for Rich to meet my mother and win her over. In fact, I arranged it so my mother would want to cook a meal especially for him. I had some help from Auntie Sue Yan. Auntie Sue was my mother's friend from way back. They were very close, which meant that they were ceaselessly tormenting each other with boasts and secrets. And I gave Auntie Sue a secret to boast about. After walking through North Beach one Sunday, I suggested to Rich that we stop by for a surprise visit to my Auntie Sue and Uncle Canning. They lived on Leavenworth, just a few blocks west of my mother's apartment. It was late afternoon, just in time to catch Aunt Sue preparing Sunday dinner. Stay, she had insisted. No, it's just that we were walking by. I said, already cooked enough for you, see? 1 soup, 4 dishes. You don't eat it, only have to throw it away. Wasted. How could we refuse? Which reference?
1 soup.
1 soup, 4 dishes.
You know what that is? Okay, I'll take it.
Oh my God, no. But I was going to say that is another of like our 4 directions. There's another 4. It's a balanced thing. How could we refuse? 3 days later, Auntie Suyan had a thank you letter from Rich and me. Rich said it was the best Chinese food he had ever tasted, I wrote. So what is Auntie Sue going to do? She's going to call Waverly's mom and tell her how awesome it is. Lindo's not going to like that. And the next day, my mother called me to invite me to a belated birthday dinner for my father. My brother Vincent was bringing his girlfriend, Lisa Lum. I could bring a friend, too. I knew she would do this because cooking was how my mother expressed her love, her pride, her power, her proof that she had knew more than Auntie Sue. Just be sure to tell her later that her cooking was the best you ever tasted, that it was far better than Auntie Sue's. I told Rich, believe me. The night of the dinner, I sat in the kitchen watching her cook, waiting for the right moment to tell her about our marriage plans, that we had decided to get married next July, about 7 months away. She was chopping eggplant into wedges, chattering at the same time about Auntie Suyan. She can only cook looking at a recipe. My instructions are in my fingers. I know what secret ingredients to put in just by using my nose. And she was slicing with such a ferocity, seemingly inattentive to her sharp cleaver, that I was afraid her fingertips would become one of the ingredients in the red-cooked eggplant and shredded pork dish. I was hoping she would say something first about Rich. I had seen her expression when she opened the door, her forced smile as she scrutinized him from head to toe, checking her appraisal of him against that already given to her by Auntie Suyan. I tried to anticipate what criticisms she would have. Which was not only not Chinese, he was also a few years younger than I was. Ooh-hoo-hoo. And unfortunately, he looked much younger with his curly red hair, smooth pale skin, and a splash of orange freckles across his nose.
Oh, it's very white.
He's white, yeah. He was a bit on the short side, compactly built. In his dark business suits, he looked nice, but easily forgettable, like somebody's nephew at a funeral, which is why I didn't notice him the first year we worked together at the firm. But my mother noticed everything. So what do you think of Rich? I finally asked, holding my breath. She tossed the eggplant in the hot oil, and it made a loud, angry hissing sound. So many spots on his face, she said. I could feel the pinpricks on my back. They're freckles. Freckles are good luck, you know. I said a bit too heatedly, in trying to raise my voice above the din of the kitchen. Oh, she said innocently. Yes, the more spots, the better. Everybody knows that. She considered this a moment and then smiled and spoke in Chinese. Maybe this is true. When you were young, you got the chicken pox. So many spots. You had to stay home for 10 days. So lucky, you thought. I couldn't save Rich in the kitchen, and I couldn't save him later at the dinner table. He had brought a bottle of French wine, something he did not know my parents could not appreciate. My parents did not even own wine glasses. And then he also made the mistake of drinking not 1, but 2 frosted glasses full, while everybody else had a half an inch just for taste. When I offered Rich a fork, he insisted on using the slippery ivory chopsticks. Those are like the really good chopsticks. And if you're not good at them, they just, poof. Yikes. He held them splayed like a knock-kneed legs of an ostrich while picking up a large chunk of sauce-coated eggplant. Halfway between his plate and his open mouth, the chunk fell on the crisp white shirt and then slid into his crotch. It took several minutes to get Shoshana to stop shrieking with laughter. And then he had helped himself to big portions of the shrimp and snow peas, not realizing he should have taken only a polite spoonful until everybody had had a morsel. He had declined the sautéed new greens, the tender and expensive leaves of bean plants plucked before the sprouts turn into beans. And Shoshana refused to eat them also, pointing to Rich. He didn't eat them. He didn't eat them. He thought he was being polite by refusing seconds when he should have followed my father's example, who made a big show of taking small portions of second, thirds, and even fourths, always saying he could not resist another bite of something or another, and then groaning that he was so full he thought he would burst. But the worst was when Rich criticized my mother's cooking, and he didn't even know what he had done. As is the Chinese cook's custom, my mother always made disparaging remarks about her own cooking. That night, she chose to direct it toward her famous steamed pork and preserved vegetable dish, which she always served with special pride. "Aye, this dish not salty enough, no flavor," she complained after tasting a small bite. "It is too bad to eat." This was our family's cue to eat some and proclaim it the best she ever made. But before we could do so, Rich said, "You know, all it needs is a little soy sauce." And he proceeded to pour a river full of the salty black stuff on the platter right before my mother's horrified eyes. And even though I was hoping throughout the dinner that my mother would somehow see Rich's kindness, his sense of humor, his boyish charm, I knew he had failed miserably in her eyes. Rich obviously had had a different opinion on how the evening had gone. When we got home that night, after we put Shoshana to bed, he said modestly, "Well, I think we hit it off A-OK." He had the look of a Dalmatian, panting, loyal, waiting to be petted. I said. I was putting on an old nightgown, a hint that I was not feeling amorous. I was still shuddering, remembering how Rich had firmly shaken both my parents' hands with the same easy familiarity he used with nervous new clients. "Linda, Tim," he said, "we'll see you soon, I'm sure." My parents' names are Lindo and Tin, and nobody except a few older family friends ever calls them by their first names. "So what did she say when you told her?" And I knew he was referring to our getting married. I had told Rich earlier that I would tell my mother first and let her break the news to my father. "I never had a chance," I said, which was true. How could I have told my mother I was getting married when at every possible moment we were alone, she seemed to remark on how much expensive wine Rich liked to drink, or how pale and ill he looked, or how sad Shoshana, oh my gosh, I could not do that. Shoshana seemed to be. I was laughing. Rich was smiling. "How long does it take to say, 'Mom, Dad, I'm getting married'?" You don't understand my mother." Rich shook his head. "Woof, you can say that again. Her English was so bad, you know?" I'm laughing because of reactions in the classroom. When she was talking about that dead guy showing up on Dynasty, I thought she was talking about something that happened in China a long time ago. This is the same guy that's so amazing and Waverly loves him so much, just criticizing her mother. That night after the dinner, I lay in bed tense. I was despairing over this latest failure, made worse by the fact that Rich seemed blind to it all. He looked so pathetic, those words. My mother was doing it again, making me see black where I once saw white. In her hands, I always became the pawn. I could only run away, and she was the queen, able to move in all directions, relentless in her pursuit, always able to find my weaker spots. I woke up late, with teeth clenched and every nerve on edge. Rich was already up, showered, and reading the Sunday paper. "Morning, doll," he said between noisy munches of cornflakes. I put on my jogging clothes and headed out the door, got into the car, and drove to my parents' apartment. Marlene was right. I had to tell my mother that I knew what she was doing, her scheming ways of making me miserable. By the time I arrived, I had enough anger to fend off 1,000 flying cleavers. My father opened the door and looked surprised to see me. "Where's Ma?" I asked, trying to keep my breath even. He gestured to the living room and back. I found her sleeping soundly on the sofa. The back of her head was resting on a white embroidered doily. Her mouth was slack, and all the lines in her face were gone. With her smooth face, she looked like a young girl, frail, guileless, and innocent. One arm hung limply down the side of the sofa. Her chest was still. All her strength was gone. She had no weapons, no demons surrounding her. She looked powerless, defeated. And then I was seized with the fear that she looked like because she was dead. She had died when I was having terrible thoughts about her. No, it's just in her imagination. I'd wished her out of my life, and she had acquiesced, floating out of her body to escape my terrible hatred. Ma, I said sharply, Ma, I whined, starting to cry. And her eyes slowly opened. She blinked. Her hands moved with life. Shema? Mei, is that you? I was speechless. She had not called me Mei, my childhood name, in many years. She sat up, and the lines in her face returned. Only now they seemed less harsh, soft creases of worry. Why are you here? Why are you crying? Something has happened. I didn't know what to say, or what to do or say. In a matter of seconds, it seemed I had gone from being angered by her strength to being amazed by her innocence, and then frightened by her vulnerability. Now I felt numb, strangely weak, as if someone had unplugged me and the current running through me had stopped. Nothing's happened. Nothing's the matter. I don't know why I'm here, I said in a hoarse voice. I wanted to talk to you. I wanted to tell you. Rich and I are getting married. I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting to hear her protests, her laments, the dry voice delivering some sort of painful verdict. I already know this, she said, as if to ask why I was telling her this again. You know? Of course, even if you didn't tell me, she said simply. This was worse than I had imagined. She had known all along when she criticized the mink jacket, when she belittled his freckles and complained about his drinking habits. She disapproved of him. I know you hate him, I said in a quavering voice. I know you think he's not good enough, but I hate. Why do you think I hate your future husband? You never want to talk about him. The other day, when I started to tell you about him and Shoshana at the Exploratorium, you changed the subject. You started talking about Dad's exploratory surgery, and then, why is it more important? Explore fun or explore sickness? I wasn't going to let her escape this time. And then when you met him, you said he had spots on his face. She looked at me puzzled. Is this not true? Yes, but you said it just to be mean, to hurt me, to... Why do you think these bad things about me? Her face looked old and full of sorrow. So you think your mother is this bad? You think I have a secret meaning? But it is you who have this meaning. She thinks I am this bad. She sat straight and proud on the sofa, her mouth clamped tight, her hands clasped together, her eyes sparkling with angry tears. Oh, her strength, her weakness, both pulling me apart. My mind was flying one way, my heart another. I sat down on the sofa next to her, the two of us stricken by the other. It felt as if I had lost this battle, but one that I didn't know I had been fighting. I was weary. I'm going home, I finally said. I'm not feeling too good right now. You have become ill, she murmured, putting her hand on my forehead. Even in this moment, her mom is still being her mom. She wants to make sure she's okay. No, I said, I wanted to leave. I just don't know what's inside me right now. Then I will tell you. You should annotate this part. I love this part. She said simply, and I stared at her. Half of everything inside you, she explained in Chinese, is from your father's side. This is natural. They are the Jong clan, Cantonese people, good, honest people, although sometimes they are bad-tempered and stingy. You know this from your father, how he can be, unless I remind him. And I was thinking to myself, why is she telling me this? What does this have to do with anything? But my mother continued to speak, smiling broadly, sweeping her hand. And half of everything inside you is from me, your mother's side, from the Sun clan in Taiwan. In Taiyan. She wrote about the characters out of the back of the envelope, forgetting that I cannot read Chinese. We are a smart people, very strong, tricky, and famous for winning wars. You know Sun Yat-sen, huh? I nodded. He is from the Sun clan, but his family moved to the south many centuries ago, so he is not exactly the same clan. My family has always lived in Taiyan, from before the days of even Sun Wei. Do you know Sun Wei? I shook my head. And although I didn't know where this conversation was going, I felt soothed. It seemed like the first time we had had an almost normal conversation. He went to battle with Genghis Khan. And when the Mongol soldiers shot at Sun Wei's soldiers, their arrows bounced off the shields like rain on stone. Sun Wei had made a kind of armor so strong Genghis Khan believed it was magic. Genghis Khan must have invented some magic arrows then, I said. After all, he did conquer China. My mother acted as if she hadn't heard me right. This is true. We always know how to win. So now you know what is inside you. almost all good stuff from Taiyan. That's probably a good line to also underline. I guess we've evolved to just winning in the toy and electronics market, I said. How do you know this? She asked eagerly. You see it on everything, made in Taiwan. Aye, she cried loudly. I'm not from Taiwan. That's why I had to correct myself when I first said that, because I always do that. And just like that, the fragile connection we were starting to build snapped. I was born in China, in Taiyan. She said, Taiwan is not China. Well, China disagrees with that. Well, I only thought you said Taiwan because it sounds the same, I argued, irritated that she was upset by such an unintentional mistake. Sound completely different, country and completely different. She said in a huff, people there only dream that it is China because if you are Chinese, you can never let go of China in your mind. We sank into silence, a stalemate, and then her eyes lighted. Now, listen up. You can also say the name of Taiyan is Bing. Everyone from that city calls it that. Easier for you to say, Bing. It is a nickname. She wrote down the character and I nodded as if this made everything perfectly clear. The same as here, she added in English. You call Apple for New York, Frisco for San Francisco. Nobody calls San Francisco that, I said, laughing. People who call it that don't know any better. Now you understand my meaning, said my mother triumphantly. I smiled. And really, I did understand finally. Not what she had just said, but what had been true all along. I said what I had been fighting for. It was for me, a scared child who had run away a long time ago to what I had imagined was a safer place. And hiding in this place, behind my invisible barriers, I knew what lay on the other side. Her side attacks, her secret weapons, her uncanny ability to find my weakest spots. But in the brief instance that I had peered over the barriers, I could finally see what was really there. An old woman, a wok for her armor, a knitting needle for her sword, getting a little crabby as she waited patiently for her daughter to invite her in. Rich and I have decided to postpone our wedding. My mother says July is not a good time to go to China for our honeymoon. She knows this because she and my father have just returned from a trip to Beijing and Taiyan. It is too hot in the summer. You will only grow more spots, and then your whole face will become red, she tells Rich, and Rich grins, gestures his thumb towards my mother, and says to me, Can you believe what comes out of her mouth? Now I know where you get your sweet, tactful nature. You must go in October. That is the best time. Not too hot, not too cold. I am thinking of going back then, too, she says authoritatively, and then she hastily adds, Of course, not with you. I laughed nervously, and Rich jokes, That'd be great, Lindo. You can translate all the menus for us and make sure we're not eating snakes or dogs by mistake. I almost kick him. No, this is not my meaning, insists my mother. Really, I'm not asking. And I know what she really means. She would love to go to China with us, and I would hate it. 3 weeks' worth of her complaining about dirty chopsticks and cold soup, 3 meals a day, well, it would be a disaster. Yet, part of me also thinks the whole idea makes perfect sense. The 3 of us, leaving our differences behind, stepping onto the plane together, sitting side by side, lifting off, moving west to reach the east. We did it! Guess what? If you're reading this recording, if you made it all the way, no quiz tomorrow.